Yá'át'ééh, my relatives. Hello, it's Mark Charles. Today is Wednesday, September 11. I'm sitting here with my second cup of coffee. And I am excited to discuss the ABC 2024 presidential debate between Vice President Harris and former President Trump. If you didn't watch it last night, I'm sure you've heard some about it this morning if you've watched any news. But I've watched the debates, and I watched most of it last night. I go to bed fairly earlier now than I used to. I try to get in bed by 10:30, so I watched until the first commercial break. Went to bed, didn't listen to any news this morning, and then watched the end of the debate this morning and talked about it a little bit with a few friends. And now I'm excited to discuss this debate with you and lay out some of my initial thoughts regarding what took place last night. But yeah, I'm glad you're here. I hope you have your first cup of your morning beverage, whatever it may be, tea or water or glass of milk or a cup of coffee. But let me start as I always do and acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from the lands of the Piscataway. This area is now known as Washington, D.C., or Washington, as my the Navajo people like to call it. But I moved here with my family from the Navajo Nation almost a decade ago, and these are the traditional lands of the Piscataway. So I want to honor the Piscataway as the hosts of the land where I'm living. I want to thank the Piscataway for their stewardship of these lands. And I want to just state how humble I am to be living, breathing, moving, walking, running, living on these lands today. So, my Piscataway relatives, thank you for your stewardship of these lands. There's a few things I want to discuss before we jump straight into the debate. I want to just give you a little bit of what's going on with my travel schedule. Next week, Friday, I'm going to be in Denver, Colorado at Denver Seminary, and I'm speaking at the Gospel Initiative. And they have a conference going on. It's a one-day conference on compelling, incredible witnesses, the church and politics. Tim Alberta, Dr. Ryan Burge, myself, Justin Giboney, and Mark Young, who is the president, Dr. Mark Young, who is the president of Denver Seminary, will all be speaking at this event. And we're going to be talking about the voice of church in politics. And I'm very excited to be here with these distinguished speakers. And I'm grateful for an opportunity to talk about some of my experience, both talking to the church as well as trying to lay out a political conversation for our nation as well. The good news is this conference is actually going to be not only an in-person conference, but it's going to be streamed live. And so the registration is free, but you do need to register. And so I'm going to put the link to that in the chat right now. And if you want to attend this conference, you can attend from anywhere around the country you want to. It's happening next Friday. It's an all-day conference. I will be giving a plenary session in the morning, doing a seminar and a breakout session in the afternoon, and then be a part of a panel just before the conference ends. It goes, I think, from 9 o'clock or 8:30 to 3:30, I believe it is. But yeah, I'm excited to be there. It should be a great discussion and dialogue, and I invite you to attend. It's free, open to the public, but you do need to register. And if you're in the Denver area, stop on by. I'd love to meet you and say hello and just touch base for a few minutes. I'll be there all day. And if you're in Denver and you have a church that would like me to preach that Sunday that I'm going to be there, I'm actually at the moment planning to be in Denver over that weekend. So it's the weekend of the 21st and 22nd. And so if you attend a church in Denver and you are interested in having me preach at your church, I would love to talk with you about that. Feel free to reach out to me. There's a contact me page on my website at wirelesshogan.com. Yeah, reach out to me on social media. I would love to see if we could find a way to work that out. I know it's last minute, but I'm excited to be there and see what kind of dialogue we can generate while I'm there for that weekend. All right, my relatives. Well, let's jump into this discussion today. Who's on with me? Yá'át'ééh, Susan. Thank you for being here. Glad you could join this morning. Mr. Phil Fox, thank you as always. It was great to talk with you earlier this morning. I hope you're having a good day. Ahiat for being a part of this second cup of coffee. I wanted to let you know I've changed a bit of how I drink my coffee now. I'm doing what's called a TRE, which is a time restricted eating window. And so I try to not eat. I take my first calories or my last calories of the day. I take around 7 p.m. And my first calories of the day, I take around 9 a.m. And so I usually will just drink either water in the morning after I wake up, or actually sometimes I'll have a half a cup of black coffee, which has no calories in it, no sugar, no cream, just black coffee. And I didn't think I like it as much as I would, but I actually really enjoy it. I really enjoy my half cup or my smaller cup of black coffee in the morning. And now I'm drinking my coffee, no sugar, but I do have cream, and I enjoy my coffee with cream. So, Susan, you must have been up a while. I see you're on your fourth cup of tea. That's great. I hope you're enjoying it. But yeah, thanks for being here. So anyway, let's talk about this debate last night. You all know it was a lot of even negotiating going into the debate. Were the mics going to be turned on when they were speaking, when they weren't speaking, or were they not? Surprisingly, it was actually the Harris campaign who was trying to negotiate that they wanted the mics turned on between when they were speaking as compared to Trump. I thought Trump would be the one who wanted them on, but apparently it was the Harris campaign who was saying, no, we actually want to keep them on. And Trump was saying, no, we negotiated with Biden and the Biden administration beforehand that we were going to have them off. And I was surprised at that. I didn't expect that because I know how disruptive Trump likes to be, and that's how he gets a lot of his words in, is when he just kind of interrupts and interjects himself while someone else is speaking. But I really appreciated the fact that they didn't have a studio audience. I thought that really helped to be able to keep the debate much more kind of focused and without the distraction, especially for Donald Trump. He gets really distracted and plays very much to the audience. And so I felt it was good that they just had the audience and the moderators on the screen, or in the room, actually. So if you remember the previous debate, again, this is debate that really kind of raised a lot of questions regarding Joe Biden and regarding his ability to be really fully engaged during this campaign. And during that debate, and I've thought a lot about this, not just this year, but even when I was running for president in 2020, what do you need to do to debate Donald Trump? How do you debate someone who displays all the classic symptoms of narcissism, who constantly lies and does not hold himself to any sort of truth or standard of how to speak, and who plays very much to the audience? And by taking the live audience away, I thought that really helped just keep the debate focused on the questions that were being asked, and neither candidate was able to play to the audience. But really, to debate Donald Trump effectively, I've been convinced for a number of years, you just have to be the adult in the room, right? Donald Trump has very little, if any, impulse control. He says whatever comes to his mind. He doesn't even think about what he's saying, and he just spews out whatever makes sense to him in that very moment. And if you just allow him to be who he is, he will make it very clear who he is and how engaged he is, and who he's thinking about and what he's thinking about. And all you have to do with Donald Trump is, if you can keep your position as you're the adult in the room, and you keep your focus on the questions being asked and on the policies that you're describing, and you just allow Trump to do his little circus act, it will become very clear very quickly who is actually most ready to do this job and who is not ready. And Donald Trump will demonstrate his lack of preparedness and his lack of engagement and his lack of understanding of the issues very clearly if you just allow him to begin to do what he does. And you maintain being the adult in the room. Both Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden at times tried to play into Trump. And they tried to come back to his interruptions with their own interruptions and tried to come back with his attacks with their own attacks. And that never worked. Trump is a master at that game. You're not going to win that game. But when it comes to the issues and engaging with the American people and talking to people about who they are and what they want to see done in our country, Trump's has never done that very effectively. And that's where Joe Biden really missed the opportunity in the last election. All he had to do was to stay engaged and be the adult in the room. And in the end, he ended up challenging Trump to some kind of a golf match and some kind of a hitting contest. I don't even know what it was. And Trump had to be the one to say, let's just be adults here. Right? That was kind of the lowest point in my mind of that last debate. And I thought in this debate that Vice President Harris did a very good job of not responding to Trump's absurd and outlandish remarks and interjections and things like that. I felt she was able to stay on topic very well, to answer the questions, or at least attempt to answer the questions that were being asked. And allow Trump to go off into his own, left field whenever he wanted to, and just a right field, I guess, since he's with the GOP. But anyway, go off into his own little area and kind of do his little song and dance, making it very clear he didn't even understand what was being asked of him and wasn't even at all interested in answering the questions that were being asked of him. And so I felt throughout the debate, I was kind of on edge, you might want to say, because I have not seen someone debate Donald Trump effectively. And I felt like Vice President Harris did one of the best jobs that I've seen of anyone trying to debate Donald Trump regarding these issues. I also want to say I deeply appreciated the moderators, David Muir and Lindsay Davis. I thought they did an excellent job. If you want to know, AXIOS just put out a little article about who they were and what their background is. But I thought they did a good job. I especially really appreciated the way that they tried to bring things back to the question, and usually 2 times. They didn't press beyond that, but they would usually come back at least one other time when a candidate did not answer a question and say, I want a yes or no answer, or I want a response to this. Please answer this question. I appreciated that. I also appreciated, I think it was the 2 times that they really abruptly fact-checked and quickly fact-checked Donald Trump. When he was talking about immigrants were eating pets and stuff in the city, in this one city, and they literally said, we just talked to the city manager, and there is nothing like that going on in the city. I really like that. And then when Trump was claiming that Democrats were literally letting babies be born and then deciding if they were going to abort them, and essentially he called it executing them. Lindsay Davis came back and said, Mr. Trump, that is not legal in any state in this union. And so I really appreciated that they didn't just let him make some of these completely absurd comments without at least being said, yeah, that's not true, Mr. Former President. And so I appreciated that. I actually would have liked it if they would have come back even harder and required them or got them to answer the questions that they were asking. I think both at different times, both Vice President Harris and former President Trump deflected questions and didn't answer the questions that they were being asked. And that was a bit of a disappointment for me. The other thing I think that Harris did well is when Donald Trump got absurd, she pointed it out. right? I mean, she started out saying, yeah, he's going to go this way. He's going to say these things. He's going to make these false claims or even lie to us. And we have to be prepared for that. I loved where she said, if you want to hear what he's concerned about, go to one of his rallies. She literally invited the nation to attend a Trump rally. And she said he's going to talk about fictional characters. He's going to talk about himself. He's going to talk about all these things. And you're going to see people leaving towards the end because he's been on stage so long. And he's just almost like the Fox News people, right? When Trump calls into Fox News and just goes on and on and on and on. Finally, they have to say to Mr. President, we know you're busy. He's not busy. He's calling in the middle of the day, right? He's not busy. They have a break. They have an agenda they have to do on their show. They're busy. They're doing work. Trump is just biding his time. And so I really like the way that Harris literally challenged people to go to a rally and listen to him and see if you hear him talking about your concerns, or is he just going off on things that he wants to espouse on at that very moment in time. So I really appreciated that. I also really appreciated the way where they were talking about him denying the election, and he was asked directly that he denied the election, and then he made a statement a while ago, not too long ago actually, that he was conceding the election, and he did lose by a little bit. And when he was asked that, he came right back and just boldly stated that he denied that he lost that election. He doubled down on his conspiracy theories. And Vice President Harris basically said, is this the kind of mental capacity or mental clarity we want for someone holding the office of the President of the United States? Someone who is ignoring what the courts say, ignoring what everyone understands and accepts, ignoring what has been proven in court and by judges, and he is still in denial about this. And I thought that was a very, very good way for her to just kind of say, yeah, listen to what he's saying. Listen to what he's saying and how he's going on here, and let that guide how you're going to vote. Now, all of that being said, I thought there were a few things that I wish both candidates would have answered. There were a few questions that I think both former President Trump and Vice President Harris would have answered, and they both did not answer these questions. I'll go through the two questions I wish Donald Trump would have answered. He was asked if he would veto a national abortion ban. He has stated at several points that he's kind of backtracked his talk on abortion. He said that he thinks there should be a longer waiting period, and he hasn't taken the staunch pro-life stance on abortion that a lot of the Republicans are taking. And he was asked about that, and he did not answer that question. He refused to answer that question. Second, he was asked about his plan of what he would replace Obamacare with, and what his healthcare plan was. And he also didn't get into any specifics there. And he actually admitted he doesn't have a plan. He said he has a concept for a plan, but he admitted he does not have a plan. And all he has is a concept. And he said, but we're going to have a great plan. And if you elect me, we'll get into office and we'll make a great plan. And what we have will be absolutely wonderful. And second, he refused to answer the question about environment. I think it was the last question of the debate when both Vice President Harris and former President Trump were asked about the environment, and neither one of them answered that question very directly. Vice President Harris alluded to a few things, but Trump just completely ignored the question and only responded to manufacturing jobs and the economy, some economic issues, and didn't talk about the environment at all. And so I really wish that that he would have answered questions about a national abortion ban. Would he veto it? What is his plan for replacing Obamacare? If he's so adamant to get it out, what's he going to replace it with? And what is his thoughts about the environment? Now, regarding Vice President Harris, there were a few questions that I wish, and she at least addressed most of the questions. Well, no, she didn't address one. She didn't address at all. The second, she addressed, or the first she addressed a little. The second she didn't address at all. She was asked about how her views on fracking have changed. When she ran for president in 2020, back when I was running, even when she was in the Senate, she was opposed to fracking. And now in Pennsylvania, where they were having the debate and where fracking is done on a very large scale, she is coming out very much in support of fracking and is in support of this industry and this way of extracting oil from the ground. And she talked about her values. Her policies have changed, but her values haven't changed. But she didn't address why she is now supporting fracking when she was literally before saying she did not oppose, she was opposed to fracking and she wanted to end it. And I was disappointed that she was not more clear regarding the issue of fracking. And then second, there was a question she was asked by Trump. This actually, I don't think this was a question she was asked by the moderators, but this when her and Trump were having one of their back and forths. Trump, she was trying to press Trump to answer his question on a national abortion ban. And Trump pressed Harris, Vice President Harris, to at what point would she limit abortion? At 7 months, 8 months? At what point? He wasn't conceding that his other statement was a lie about executing babies after they were born, but he was asking, at what point do you want to limit abortions? At what point is there? And she didn't answer him. She's basically said, you answer the national abortion ban question, and then I'll answer this question. And of course, neither one of them answered. And so we never got an answer from her on that. And I think, so for me, those were some of the questions. The questions on abortion, the questions on environment, and the questions on healthcare were the questions that were not answered. She did answer the question on healthcare. I appreciated that. But those were the things where I actually think if we look at them not as candidates, not as Democrats and Republicans, if we look at them as people, I think, well, on one issue, they would agree. I think if they weren't candidates and they weren't Democrat versus Republican, they would probably actually agree on abortion, right? At one point, Trump was actually very pro-abortion back in the 1990s and even early 2000s, right? It wasn't until he started courting the conservatives as he was pondering running for president. It might have been even back in 2011 is the first time he really started stating he was pro-life. And there was actually an article, I'm going to put this in here. This is the NBC News, a timeline of Trump's many positions on abortion. And I think actually Trump and Harris would agree on abortion if they were not candidates. And I think as candidates, they both agree on fracking, right? I think they both agree on fracking. Trump is trying to hit Vice President Harris regarding fracking because he's playing to his base. But I think they both have come around and they agree on fracking. Vice President Harris has accepted fracking and is not opposed to it, and is actually campaigning on it in Pennsylvania of, yes, we're going to continue going this route, and is being very clear she's not going to do anything to stand in the way of that industry. And so to me, that was those two issues were problematic, and I would have liked much more honest and even real responses from both candidates about those issues, because I think this is where we have to find a way to have this debate and to have this discussion. And I was doing some searching because the Harris campaign and Vice President Harris tried to really demonstrate that her and Trump were from two different generations, and that Trump was kind of the old school, very much like Biden was, and Vice President Harris was representing a new generation of voters and a new generation of people. And so I just did a little Googling today, and I did some research on where are they in generations? How apart are they in age and in generations? And what's fascinating, this is a graph I got from parents.com. It's a year-by-year guide to different generations. I'll put this link into the chat right now. But if you can see, so Vice President Harris was born, I think it was October of 1964, and Donald Trump was born in June of 1946. Technically, right, they're both members of the boomer generation. They're both baby boomers. One is a very, very, very old baby boomer, and one is a very, very, very young baby boomer. But they're technically from the same generation. And that link in there isn't going to work. Let me put another link in. Sorry, let me refresh this link. I only half copied it. There's the second one there. The second parents link is the one that works. The first one was only a partial link. Yeah, they're both boomers, which I found to be pretty interesting, right? One's a very old boomer, the other's a very young boomer, but they're both boomers. And second of all, they're both politicians, and they're running in these parties that are really opposed to each other and are working very hard to be opposed to each other. And so again, I think if they were both talking as people, they would probably both agree on abortion. And when they both talk as politicians, they both agree on fracking. But they stand on stage and they attack each other for these issues that they both agree, one politically and one personally, on these issues. And yet, because they're members of these parties, they're attacking each other for them. And while I appreciate the fact that Vice President Harris is trying to move past these tired, I don't want to call them debates, attacks that have been going on. And what was really framing the discussion between President Biden and former President Trump when they were running against each other was Trump's message hasn't changed, right? Which is that the Democrats are destroying everything, and we are in the worst position we've ever been. We've had the worst inflation, the worst everything that's ever been. They're the worst president. They're the worst everything that's ever been, and only I can fix it. And President Biden was actually saying the same thing. President Trump is the worst president we've ever seen. He's a threat to our democracy. He's a horrible, horrible person. And he's a horrible, horrible president. And I'm the only one who can save us. And they were both talking about each other and our country in this incredibly extreme. They're the problem. I'm the only one who can fix it. And if you elect them, it's going to be the end of the world. And if you elect me, it's going to be a new heaven and a new earth, right? I mean, this is the language they were both using. And I appreciate that Vice President Harris is trying to get past that type of rhetoric. But Donald Trump was not able to go past that. I mean, he just kept using that same language and that same rhetoric. And Harris tried to point it out. She tried to get past it, but I found that, especially I think for younger voters, right? I'm Gen X. I was born in the middle of the Gen X generation. And for Gen X, millennials, and especially Gen Z, right? Issues like the environment are of major, major importance. And it's the older generation, it's the boomers who are much more adamant, like, no, we have to fix our economy. We have to keep our economy running. We have to keep doing these things. And we have to make sure that our economy doesn't get hurt. Yes, the environment may be important, maybe not, maybe it's real, maybe it's not, but we have to focus mostly on the economy, right? I mean, Clinton's whole thing when he ran, it's the economy, stupid, right? It's all, if you just fix the economy, everything else will be okay. And especially our younger generations are saying, no, that's not true, right? What we're doing economically is having devastating impacts on our environment. And we have to make some serious changes to how we behave economically in order to fix what's going on environmentally. And so I find that both Harris and Trump are now basically saying the same thing. Vice President Harris is saying, yes, the environment's important, but we can't let that hurt us economically. And Trump is saying, this may not even be real, so I'm just going to make this the greatest economy we're ever going to have. But neither one of them are prioritizing the environment. And especially among younger voters, what they are saying, as I'm listening to young people around the country, is saying, no, we have to prioritize the environment now. This is our future you're talking about. This is our future you're delaying investing in. This is our future that you're willing to gamble with. And so I think both Vice President Harris and the Democrats need to do a better job of addressing environmental issues and need to start talking about how are they going to begin to take these things seriously. Now, the other ways these two candidates are similar is they're both running for president, right? And again, may not be as much of an issue with Harris as it is with Trump. But we even saw this with Obama, right? When you want to be president, you have to make yourself safe to white landowning men. And that means you have to support things like fracking and oil and corporations and all these things, right? Because that's where white landowning men with power are. That's where they exist. And so I wish they would have addressed those questions better in this debate. And while I appreciated the way Vice President Harris demonstrated her ability to handle someone like Donald Trump, I appreciated the way she was able to focus on the questions being asked and the conversations that we should be having in this debate or in this election. I think there's still more that has to be done. And right, this is the challenge is when you go out to the extremes, which is where Trump has gone and where Biden was going, then to fix it, you just come back to the middle, and there's very little change at the middle. There's very little change at the middle. And that's the challenge we've been facing as a nation for the past 250 years, right? We had a question on race in the debate, and nothing was said about how our Declaration of Independence refers to natives as merciless Indian savages. Our Constitution specifically excludes natives, never mentions women, and counts African Americans as 3/5 of a person. We had nothing, no one mentioned the fact that to this day, 2024, slavery is still constitutionally protected under the jurisdiction of our criminal justice system. Trump is saying the justice system has been weaponized. Well, I got news for you, Mr. Former President. The criminal justice system was weaponized when it was founded, right? It has always been a weapon. Just ask any person of color throughout history. Yes, this has always been a weapon. Sorry, my background changed there. I wasn't paying attention. Let me go back to it. Hold on just a second. There we go. But so anyway, these are the debates we have to have. If we want change, these are the things we have to address, right? We have to address what's written into the founding documents of this nation. We have to address what have been the core premises of our Supreme Court case law, right? We have to address these things at a very foundational level. And I didn't hear either candidate advocating for that kind of change. They both were playing it rather safe and talking to their bases. And, right, this is the challenge. And this is even some of the legacy of President Biden, right? You've heard me say this before. When I listened to the confirmation hearings for Deb Haaland, when she ran for Congress, she was adamantly opposed to fracking and opposed to drilling. And during her confirmation hearings to become Secretary of the Interior, she was asked by 2 Republican members of Congress, what was her stance on fracking? What was her stance on drilling? She did not reiterate her opposition to those, and they didn't care what she believed. What they wanted to know was she going to stay aligned with Biden, who was not opposed to fracking and who was not opposed to drilling? And she told them, basically, I will serve at the pleasure of the president. He is going to set the agenda, and I'm not going to oppose him. And it appears like Vice President Harris is taking the same line, which is, I'm not going to disrupt that. The Democratic Party is taking the fight out of some of their most up-and-coming and articulate voices and reframing them into mainstream politicians who in the long run are not going to be willing to engage the foundational things that just keep working to keep the status quo in place. And that's what I was listening for from Harris last night. That's what I was listening for. Is she going to be willing to address these things? Is she going to be able to stand up on this national stage and say, we have to address our nation's history. We have to talk about our foundations. And she did not appear willing to do that last night. And that, for me, was disappointing. I felt very good about the way she handled Trump and his craziness. But I still I want to see her be able to say, no, we're going to begin to have these much more difficult conversations, the conversations that even Democratic white landowning men don't want to have because of the corporations they run and the homes they live in and the treaties they've broken and all these other things that have benefited them throughout these generations. So if you were a Democrat, you probably felt really good about last night. If you're a Republican, you probably should be worried. This may not have been quite as worrisome last night as Joe Biden's performance a few months ago, but it absolutely was, in my opinion, anyone who was a Republican who was questioning whether or not they should support Donald Trump, I think he gave them very little, if any, reason why they should vote for him. And Kamala Harris allowed him to put his absurdity on full display. And I think that was probably fairly powerful. But for people like me who literally want to address the foundational problems of this country, I'm still not sure. Again, not that I'm going to vote for Trump at all, but I'm still waiting for a candidate to be willing to articulate their willingness, to demonstrate their willingness to engage in these types of not only difficult, but even politically damaging conversations. Because when you say things to put yourself into office, you then have to not disrupt those things when you get in office. Otherwise, you won't be able to stay in office. And this is where it makes change very, very, very hard. So my relatives, those are my thoughts. These are kind of my first impressions after watching the debate last night. I will probably watch it again over the weekend and maybe even try to have a guest on next week to have more discussion about this. Again, this is a good presidential campaign. I'm enjoying watching this. I want to find a way, and I want to challenge both people in both parties, right, to press your party to be better citizens of this nation, to press your party to not just keep the status quo at a bare minimum, right? We need to have some incredibly difficult and challenging conversations in this country. And just maintaining the status quo is not going to be the long-term solution. So we have to find a way to address these things at a much, much deeper level. My relatives, I appreciate you being here today. Let me see who's on this chat right now, if there's any thoughts or comments right here. Who is on here? Susan, you're on here. Great. Thanks for being here. George, appreciate you being here. Nick, appreciate your voice and in our comments here. I'm grateful for everyone who comes and sits down with me for a good cup of coffee. I really enjoy these conversations. I really enjoy these chances to talk. I do read your comments. I take them to heart and I think through them. And I appreciate all of you. My relatives, I hope you have a great day. I'm really enjoying the fall weather here in DC. It's been in the 80s this week with lows in the 60s at night. It's nice and cool. I'm really appreciating that. If you like what I'm doing here with my second cup of coffee and you appreciate the work I'm doing, I invite you to subscribe to my site on Patreon. Patreon is one of the ways I've monetized that social media platform on Patreon so that I can keep my voice as independent as possible publicly. I have not monetized my YouTube channel. I have not monetized my other social media. I work very, very hard to keep my voice independent so that I can challenge the status quo and say things that I feel need to be said. And when you subscribe to me on Patreon, even if it's just for a month, even if you just subscribe for a month, that really helps me to kind of stabilize some of my income coming in and keep my work going. Help me pay some bills and put food on my table, as well as to cover some of my business expenses. But when you're able to support me on Patreon, even if it's just for a month, it's really helpful. And now that I've been on Patreon for 3 years, there is a lot of archive content on there. And so I encourage you to look at the Patreon, the different tiers and what you get with each of those tiers. And I invite you to consider subscribing to my Patreon and go deeper into the conversations that we have going on there each month. Also, if you like what I'm talking about and you're wondering some of the foundations of the stuff I'm discussing, especially regarding our nation and our history, I invite you to look at my book, Unsettling Truths. I co-authored it with my good friend Sing-Chan Ra. You can get signed copies on my website. And if you buy 10 copies, I have what's called a book study special, where if you get 10 signed copies of my book, I will give your book study a free virtual Q&A, 45-minute virtual Q&A at some point over the next year. I'll let you schedule that with me through my administrative assistant, and look forward to having a discussion with your group about what they're working through and what they're reading in Unsettling Truth. So it's a great way not only to have a discussion regarding the doctrine of discovery, regarding that history, but even to bring in myself as the co-author of that book into that discussion. And hopefully that can even help draw people to join your book club or join your book group. My relatives, I appreciate all of you. I hope that you have a great day. Walk in beauty. And may we all learn how to walk in beauty together. Hakone.